being in government is not enough. You must have capacity to assert yourself or have like monopoly over tools of government or coercion, such as Yame, courts, and all that. The problem is that because of how South Sudan comes to be, you have two different entities who all have power and have capacity to
on either side,
each other.
economic.
Yes. In terms of military power, which forces them to have to come together and operate together within government. I think what is increasingly happening is because Salva Kiir is ill.
Very.
And he doesn't seem to have a lot of time. He's being forced to sort of initiate a transition.
This is the Policy Digest, a Center for Policy Analysis podcast that explores how African societies are governed and how people and their leaders are shaping the future of their communities. Through candid conversations and insightful analysis, we aim to provide a deeper understanding of the political, economic, and social landscape of Africa. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the diverse and dynamic world of African governance.
Welcome to the Policy Digest. Last week you could have seen us talk about the fate of American foreign policy, from how it has evolved from Trump to how it has gotten to them blocking peace between Ukraine and Russia. Now, today, we don't want to go back to America and Ukraine. We want to talk about things here, which is in Africa, which is the situation of peace within the Horn of Africa and East Africa. As you could know, the borders of Uganda and of Kenya and of Somalia, of pretty much every East African country and country within the Horn of Africa, are surrounded by so many military interests. And being particular, military interests, both that are domestic, others being external. But beneath that conflict, we must start asking ourselves, how come these wars never end? How come some come and go? How come some come faster than others? How come we never ask these questions? So for this specific podcast, we want to get into the political economy issues of these specific matters. And to do that, we are hosting Muhwezi Joshua Lawel, who is a researcher with Agora Center for Research. And he has a particular interest in regional peace and security. And at the moment, he's doing a deep throat analysis of the paramilitary trends in East Africa. Lawel, our honor to have you here.
Thank you once again. Like Joseph has said, I am called Muhwezi Joshua Lawel. I am a researcher with Agora Center for Research, but I also lead a youth organization called Tuzungumzi Africa, which is also looking at peace and security as the drive of all the other tenets of development, especially in Africa, from governance, climate action. We think it's all contingent on the state of peace and security on the continent. It's a pleasure being here. It's my first time on the show, and I look forward to a good conversation.
Oh yeah, we look forward to having you more. We've been following the great work you've been doing, and we have been looking forward to having you. So I just want to get right into it. Could you try and describe for us the security situation within the Horn of Africa and within East Africa, if we could start there?
I think that the state of security within East Africa and the Horn of Africa, by extension, is not one that you would say is good. But the problem is that you can't analyze that as a trend, because we seem to have been in this thing for the past 30 years, but you could even extend it from the point of colonialism, especially, including after the Cold War, when we have some of the states under German shift to new players like Belgium and all. And so it's hard. You would have said the current state of peace and security within the region is not good, but that seems to have become like our
So we can no longer call it a trend. We've decided to live with it.
Yeah, yes. but the short word is it's not good, and that, of course, is informed by the different interests by the member states by the foreign states, which is quite constant, but also the politics in terms of democracy itself. Because when you look at, for example, the state within South Sudan itself, with Salva Kiir's health not promising that he has a lot of time as president of South Sudan, and the transition politics there. And when you look at what's happening within Sudan itself, it's a product of failed democracy, where the people choose to take power, but the army will not accept. And also the army which takes power does not also agree on how to manage the politics. And then you have what's happening in Sudan. So part of it is the interests, the economic interest by member states and by foreign states. Also, our own failings to manage leadership questions as far as democracy and how to manage society.
I see you're touching. I think you're touching quite a critical element, which is like, what are the critical drivers of the deteriorating situation? I see you've tried to touch that. Before we forward to the next question, maybe you could just get to dive into that a bit. What are critical drivers of this deteriorating situation of peace and security?
I think that the current, so like I started with, we've been in this situation, except for Uganda, which has managed to pacify since the coming of the NRM and the Uganda People's Defense Force, and being able to pacify the northern part of Uganda and the western part with ADF. Most of that of our region most of the member states have really not been completely at peace. But maybe what you want to say is who are the new players and what's informing the current challenges. Part of it, of course, has to do with the global contest between the West and the East, but also some of it fused with BRICS interests and the competition for resources, which has informed the approach by key actors like the US and also BRICS, but also there are new players such as UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. How they pursue their interest and the new role they are playing, and how the new way they're approaching these conflicts also informs the current outlook of those conflicts. Two is also, like I said, the transition politics. The democracy itself, I wouldn't say transition politics, but like South Sudan, it's transition.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And failure to manage, and how they are managing it. From Sudan, you'd say transition from the failed transition from Bashir and the army to the people led Sudan, Khartoum. Even for Uganda, you would say how it's negotiating its stake also has to do with the transition questions within the country. Even Kenya, you would say how it's approaching this. It has to do with how Kenya is managing its politics. Also informs how the role that Kenya plays within how it negotiates, and the role it plays, especially if you look at Ruto being the chair of EAC, but also there have also been talks about, Gachagua has talked about his relationship with Hemeti, the RSF leader in Sudan. So, like I've said, the new indicators, it has to do with the current global politics. It has to do with the transition, the democracy within members, the state of democracy or leadership within member states. Of course, also the constant is the economic interest. Given I don't know if it's unique to this region or entire Africa, but the concentration of unrealized mineral capacity that exists within these member states.
I get you. And I just want us to get into the hotspots now. We had a podcast last week, still on foreign policy and foreign interests and economic interests. At some point in the conversation, we had a line of back and forth and argumentation we didn't explore, which is that global powers are pushing more or less to see, let's say, resources that are within Africa as resources that aren't entirely for Africa alone, and that must benefit the broader world. And it looks they want to commit as much either diplomatic or economic resources to achieve that objective, whatever that means. Let's get to the hotspots, right? And I wanted to start in Eastern DRC, right? So for decades now, Eastern DRC and I think even the broader DRC itself, but most importantly, Eastern DRC has harbored tens and tens of militias. And recently, I think when the M23 were taking over Goma, we saw Rwanda parade a number of foreign militants going through Kigali, getting back to Europe. So I just wanted to understand your political analysis of the interests of the different actors that we could say have a role to play within the prevailing security situation in Eastern DRC and what the future would look like.
So I don't know if I understand your question, but if, for example, I don't think that, for example, the paramilitaries that M23 and who had to go to Congo and then they left represent an active interest. I think it's just in the broader terms of the role that these...
Why do you think they don't?
Yes, you have to understand the broader role that these private security organizations are currently playing within this sector. And so they may not necessarily represent the active interests of the state from where they come from. They're just private companies that have like military personnel who can be hired to defend certain assets.
Just like Blackwater.
So yes, I think the better example is Wagner, which
Wagner
was a Russian company, which has been hired in Central African Republic. I think in the Sahel states.
Yeah.
So they're contracted to provide those services. You need to stretch to prove that they represent the active interest of the state where they come from, as opposed to a private interest. That is not to say that they aren't active interests that are extended by foreign states. I'm just saying that's not the best indicator.
Maybe just to stretch it a bit,
yes.
I understand that by the time such interests get into our country, they are still protected by the political players that be. Could be the embassy. I don't think Wagner is going to be in Central African Republic without, let's say, political back and forth between, let's say, the embassy or the political part. Would you argue that relationship cannot then be stretched to mean that then the country itself is involved if it's promoting the economic interest?
I guess what I am saying, especially for the Democratic Republic Congo situation,
yes,
if you followed those specific militias, you may not be able to get the right person. I don't know. I think that for you to be able to understand the interests within that region, you want to follow either who is deploying their army, for example, who is benefiting from the minerals, who is playing part within the negotiations. You're much more likely to get the active interest. For example, if you have Uganda deploying there, you've had Burundi, SADC, you've had Rwanda, you've had Qatar or US come up to current negotiations. I think that those would be better indicators. But I think if I get your question, is that you're trying to say who are these people who are actively interested within the DRC. Of course, there is the contemporary interest, especially by the neighboring countries like Uganda and Rwanda. Again, if we go into that, we'll have to do some level of historical contextual.
Would you have to do that?
Which I don't know if we want to get into. But quickly, of course, there's a pronounced position of Rwanda's interest in as far as security is concerned. Where you would understand that when colonialism was taking part, it was not based on nations in terms of nations, but rather by maybe geographical and other interests. So you have a certain part of the Rwandan nationals, or Rwandans by identity, who remained in the eastern part of Congo, who of course used to coexist regardless of whether they were Tutsi or Hutu until 1994, when there is the genocide, and then there is you have people who from Habyarimana's government, etc., who crossed to eastern part of Congo, and what's called the FDLR, who Rwanda says they remain a threat to Rwanda's security and also the Tutsi communities that exist within Eastern Congo, who the government of Rwanda says that it is protecting, but also protecting itself from those individuals. Of course, on several occasions, Rwanda has denied interference, but we all know that's not true. You may ask me, why do I think it's not true? I think one of the things you need to rely on was the Luanda agreement peace process that was Luanda of Agora.
Agora, yes.
And one of the things that they agreed was that, among others, was that Rwanda would get its forces out of Congo, and FDR would be neutralized. But I think by signing on, being part of that agreement, you concede
that you are
intuitively
aware.
that you are aware and you have forces that you're getting from there.
Oh, I think they inferred it.
I don't know if it's even inferring, it's confirming, because if you say, and that's why, for example, in law, words mean, when you say from, it means you have something that you're taking out of there.
Yeah.
It was, I think, for me, it was further confirmed. There was a summit by heads of states of EAC and SADC in which they upheld that specific Luanda clause process that was saying the same thing.
In the preambulatory
yes, that Rwanda needs to
to
uphold the Luanda agreement, especially in as far as getting its troops out of Congo is concerned. Because, so for me, you depending on what your source is or what you want to rely on, it's true that Rwanda had military presence within Eastern Congo.
It looks that's pretty much okay. Away from Uganda, I understand the ADF and other militants have sort of attacked the Renzoris and all. It seems to be the same incentive for Uganda.
Yeah, similar incentive, but I think not to say psychoanalysis, but you also have to understand the mind of Rwanda and Uganda and why they consistently. My opinion is that they have some level of entitlement that they ought to benefit from Eastern Congo, especially
economic.
Of course, economic, but also just projecting power. I don't know if most Ugandans do, but if you follow the CDF's tweets, I think he has made several tweets about the situation in Congo, and they always, and what he says always happens, and it has been reinforced. So one can authoritatively say that what he says reflects part of the military or state position of Uganda in Eastern Congo. And what he has said was that if the M23 continues to advance, etc., we shall also advance towards Kinshasa. Of course, Again, there's a lot of discussion between Rwanda and Congo and interference there. Maybe if you wanted the discussion to be expanded to the foreign interests that exist there, of course it has always been, but
I just wanted to do with the local interests. For example, the South African development community, before we go to the external interests.
Yes.
Because, even Uganda, Rwanda are still external in some sense.
But you mean Africa or
so, especially for Eastern DRC, yes.
Yeah, so when Tshisekedi comes in power, there is, informally, we call it bromance. This nice,
I know,
between Tshisekedi and Kagame and other players where they visit each other. Yes, and
niceties on Twitter.
Until I think Tshisekedi develops cold feet and does not include Rwanda, invites troops from Uganda and Rwanda to Eastern Congo and leaves out Rwanda. And I think Rwanda, because it has an active interest within the region, it has to push back. Yes. But also I think continuously Tshisekedi continues to feel that his interest is not best protected within the ESC parties themselves. So he seeks the effort of SADC states where he thinks he has more buy-in, or they are less.
Why does he think?
Because like we've showed, Rwanda actively, the tension increases, but also Uganda itself because of its own interest. And I think Tshisekedi feels that within the ESC bloc, he has no capacity to realize his interests. And so he goes to SADC, but you also have to understand, especially historically when there was the clashes, the Greater Congo War, when there are clashes, between the Congo government, the Congo bring calls for the interference of SADC, Zimbabwe, etc., who come to Congo to defend it against the history, the
So
late
there's like
90s and early 2000s, the
historical
Kisangani, etc.
relationship,
So,
yeah.
it is SADC which intervenes to help Congo. So you have to know, of course, Congo is a member of both blocks, but it's actively relating with us, the active neighbors. But when it sours, it goes back to SADC and then calls for
their SADC's relationship is
to
older,
come and serve
probably
and,
more stable than the one they developed with the EC
and
recently.
salvage the situation, So that explains why. But I think also SADC has, of course, SADC, you have Burundi, you have South Africa being present in Eastern Congo. They are beaten, I won't say beaten, but they are defeated by M23.
Yeah.
I think there's also a recognition then within SADC that they cannot deal with the situation without including ESC. And that's what gets to inform the summit where both ESC and SADC come together.
Well, was it in Arusha?
To seek a to find a solution. So in terms of local interest, of course, the interest is the minerals, right? But also you've got to understand that sometimes the foreign interests don't play out direct, they act through the local players to extend those specific interests.
And I wanted in the second part of the podcast for us to really dive into that kind of external external incentives. That's why I'm trying to drag the local chart. We're going to have a large chunk on that to expand into the paramilitary interest. Just to forward into our neighbors here, those who start with S and end with N, Sudan. In terms of how different players that are bordering them contribute to the situation. You talked about Kenya and this relationship with Sudan, Uganda with this relationship with Sudan, both South Sudan and Sudan, the main one. I don't know what your analysis is of what role do these local external players have in this very, very in this very saturated situation. Yes.
I don't know which Sudan to start with, but they are both.
Let's start South Sudan.
Yeah. So I think so. You probably understand the South Sudan context where you have had instances of violence, of course, between the Salva Kiir government and SPLM. There's SPLM-I, which is done in government, and there's SPLM-O, which is in opposition, that is led by Riek Machar. Of course, the thing about, and it's always about power is also, it's also, being in government is not enough. You must have capacity to assert yourself or have like monopoly over tools of government or coercion, such as Yame, courts, and all that. The problem is that because of how South Sudan comes to be, you have two different entities who all have power and have capacity to
on either side,
each other,
economic.
In terms of military power, which forces them to have to come together and operate together within government. But I think what is increasingly happening is because Salva Kiir is ill, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of time. He's being forced to sort of initiate a transition, but I think he doesn't want to do it in a way that works for every actor within the country, or even in respect with the agreements, the agreements that we've had, which have talked about holding elections, and these have continued to be extended, but also in terms of power sharing. So continuously, I think in Sudan, we feel that he wants to pass power on to the son-in-law, which is not agreeable to SPLM-O.
Is it agreeable to SPLM-I?
I think within they can always find consensus within SPLM-I, but I think the biggest threat to that SPLM-I agenda is the SPLM-O, and which is why you've had a couple of arrests, including arresting Riek Machar. Of course, Israel, it's like house arrest, but you're not allowed to move, etc. But of course, it speaks to increasing tension. You've also had tendencies by what they call the White Army from the northern part, which has also been causing some chaos. Now, I think the most interesting bit is the role of Uganda. I think Uganda continuously believes that it has a big role to play within Sudan. I think, especially in as far as how Salva Kiir gets power and how he consolidates it. But I think also there's the idea that for our own security, Sudan needs to be at peace. Of course, there's a history to that, especially given what the northern part of Uganda has been and how long it took for us to pacify it. It also means that South Sudan needs to be pacified, or needs at least to be stable for us to be guaranteed of some level of stability within the northern part of Uganda. On some other day, we can talk about what the northern part of Uganda means for the larger Ugandan stability. But I get the sense that that's what is happening. Of course, I think like a few weeks ago, last month, there were skirmishes on the border between Uganda and South Sudan, where a few, I think, people were killed. But then Muhwezi, the CDF of Uganda, managed to go to Sudan, and I think that was settled.
That was settled.
But in terms of the grand picture, I think it is the president here. The idea is that you need to keep your neighbors stable for you to feel safe. But I also think in terms of psychoanalysis of the players themselves, I think President Museveni feels as a powerful player within the region, and he needs to consolidate that, and that includes guaranteeing
military presence
and interfering and all that.
Just like America remains a superpower through providing security guarantees pretty much everywhere. Thank you. So in the second part of the podcast, we shall be diving a lot into the external interest and how it sort of drives conflict in Africa. We hope you were glued into that local context and how different parts of East Africa, that's Eastern DRC and South Sudan, are playing out. See you.
Welcome to the Parliament Performance Tracker platform, a portal designed to empower Ugandan citizens with valuable insights into their parliament's performance and financial landscape. Some of the key highlights of this platform include the Parliament Legislators Report Card. Here, you find comprehensive information on the members of the Ugandan Parliament, from contact details and their biographies to their legislative performance, including bills sponsored, bill participation, term count, and the number of parliamentary committees they sit on. This section provides a transparent view on each legislator's contributions and activities. The Finance Tracker. This consists of two powerful tools, the Budget Tracker and the Debt Tracker. The Budget Tracker displays the current budget allocations of Uganda, allowing you to track how public resources are distributed across various sectors. But that's not all. There is also the Budget Simulator tool, enabling you to actively participate in the budgeting process by simulating your preferred resource allocations. While the Debt Tracker provides insights into Uganda's national debt standing, you will discover key metrics such as the debt per citizen, GDP per capita, and per capita income, along with the sources of these loans. Stay informed about Uganda's financial health and the implications for future generations. Insights. This is a platform where you can gain valuable knowledge about parliament-related topics. Simply enter your queries and our system will fetch relevant articles and also provide AI-generated summaries, offering you a deeper understanding of the issues that matter to you. With its comprehensive tools, staying informed about Uganda's parliament and financial landscape has never been easier. Whether you're curious about your representative's performance, want to understand their budget allocations, or seek insights on parliament-related topics, this platform has you covered. Empower yourself with data and take an active role in shaping Uganda's future. Parliament Watch. Your eye on Parliament.
My apologies, I'm about to buy with a hard word. The word is called Balkanization. So if you've studied political theory, you have probably heard of the word. It refers to the fragmentation or division of a region or state into smaller, often hostile entities, usually along ethnic, religious, or cultural lines. So the reason I say this is that within East Africa, we are seeing a fundamental rise in the possibility of seeing pockets of geographical regions breaking away from the main institutions or remaining within a larger colonial nation states, but as very independent enclaves. I think we've seen this in several instances. But what is at the heart of this is there are normally a number of factors that influence this. Some of these are external, some are internal, but we can't also discount the fact that military force or forces of coercion at the heart of these kinds of separation. So the second part of the podcast is going to get into the rise of paramilitary groups, which are emerging as a powerful actor in the security situation within Eastern and Central Africa. And I just wanted to get to Lawel on this specific regard. What's your political economy analysis on the external influence of different actors out of Africa on the rise of paramilitary groups within East Africa?
So, of course, generally speaking, there's always been foreign influence, especially dealing with state actors themselves to extend these. And, for example, the relationship, with the US is that Trump knows that he'll sit with Tshisekedi and they'll strike a deal and he can leverage that and get what he wants from Congo. But I think there are also states which have realized that they don't have to go through that trouble to be able to get what they want. So they deal with these paramilitaries or empower these paramilitaries to be able to consolidate specific areas or regions of interest. And then they can also leverage that support and relationship with those let's say non-state actors to get what they want, especially in terms of resources. So how this is playing out, for example, within maybe Congo or even Sudan, is that entities such as UAE know that they can finance a paramilitary entity like the Rapid Support Forces to consolidate the larger part of Darfur, or Darfur in how we call it, pronounce it here. Or there's also the Kordofan region, which is... So what happened, for example, like last month, was that Hemeti came together with other players within the region who control specific areas, and they formed a joint government, right? Which essentially, just like the state, within that region, they are going to be able to administer governance within that region, which means that they get, for example, to tax, to issue mining or licenses.
Mining licenses,
ideally, they are not the state as recognized the state, but within that region where those paramilitaries have managed to consolidate and establish administration, they can guarantee interest to whoever supports them, just as the state itself would.
Guarantee.
And so there's no need, for example, for a particular state to have to deal with the general, the central government, for example, for it to be able to get what it wants. Another example is there's the, I think, Libya National Army under Haftar, which is in Libya. Libya is also going through the same. So you also have one that is actively financed by UAE to consolidate and guarantee those interests. So what that speaks to is that because now these guys have realized that they can get what they want without essentially working with the central government, which also has different interests that it deals with. If these guys have control over a certain region, which is oftentimes mineral rich, then we can work with them, we can sustain them to the extent that we continuously get what we want out of that specific region. And so that's part of the new trend that we are looking at, that at some point, these paramilitaries are no longer or are not as fixed to overtaking the entire government, overthrowing the government.
It's no longer their objective.
Yes, as long as they can consolidate the regions where they are, they're able to sufficiently administer them, both, of course, economically, administratively, and militarily, then they are okay with that. Does that mean that they want to get a federal status? I think it's part of the things that they would largely want to negotiate for. But my argument is also that they do not need to be legally recognized in the current framework of recognizing states for them to be able to achieve what they want.
Achieve their interests, yes.
Yeah. So if you rely, for example, on the current criterion of statehood, for example, there's something called the Montevideo process where you must be recognized by other neighboring states. You must enter relations with other states. You must have a permanent population. So that process that, for example, Somaliland is battling with, they equally do not need to go through that for them to be able to get what they want, to the extent that they are guaranteed of military support from these other actors. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I
just wanted to follow up just a bit. So your argument towards close does argue that these specific people can achieve their interest even without participating in the broader state. So let's say, let me use, you said RSF, right? Who exactly is RSF? Who within RSF is determining that interest? Is it the population that RSF is sort of like commanding over? Let's say there's like a minority region within a country. A certain militia comes and let's say sends out the promise of restoration, of inclusion, and they use that sort of military force to then mobilize resources.
Yeah.
Is it democratic in some sense, or is it the military force asserting themselves over the area?
I think it's both could be true. I think you realize that one of the unique things about these paramilitaries, for example, RSF or even M23, is that they have an ethnic claim to say we represent these ethnic entities that have for so long been marginalized or not recognized or treated equally by the central governance, whether in Kinshasa or in Khartoum. So they represent that too. In terms of location, oftentimes they are located at the border, also in mineral-rich areas. So in terms of legitimacy, which I think is part of what you're asking, they drive their legitimacy in as far as we are fighting for a region that has since been at the receiving end of. So if you look at the history of RSF, for example, of course, so you understand that the new RSF-led government is broad. It's a broad. I don't want to call it government because when I use that language, it's like I'm recognizing it. But in what they announced as their government,
as a government,
it's a broad base. They have different players because Sudan is just like Congo is very big. So you have different territories which are led by certain militias. Just that RSF is the bigger one, and therefore is one which brings them together.
Brings together the militias.
Yes, it brings them together and provides leadership. So if you look, for example, within the new cabinet, you realize, for example, RSF will have the majority. Members, representatives within that cabinet or government, about either 40 to 50%. I need to get the numbers right. You have the justice force. You have there's also SPLM North, which also has its share. So they share, so that they are different. But when you speak about RSF in specific terms, it only.
Yeah.
And I met its history. Of course, it was initially established by the Bashir government. I don't know if you know about the Janjaweed. It was used to suppress the people within Darfur who were contesting the Bashir government. You get? With time, it evolves
to become a
recognized entity within the Sudan army
like the PPU, the way it became a
SFC? Within infrastructure.
Yeah.
You get, so it evolves. So if you, so there's a lot of moving parts. So Hemeti, the name Hemeti within their language means protector. So essentially, RSF becomes a guarantor or protector of Bashir outside the official military force. Something akin to SFC, but not the same, but entirely to... So also history. So Sudan itself has a history of coups. So it was important for Bashir to get some sort of outfit that shields him from potential coups that is outside the official military infrastructure. That's how you get RSF, which is Rapid Support Forces. But with time,
even the name itself,
but with time, with time, it gets empowered. But because it was also controlling certain regions which were mineral rich, so it becomes a strong army with a lot of say. And with time, it's also incorporated within the military structure of Sudan. So it becomes at the same level with SAF, for example. SAF is the official army. They have
just
UPDF
like
here. There's also there's also the investigative body. So at some point, Bashir also promotes it to have equal status within government, right? And so when there's a lot that happens there, but when Bashir is overthrown by the people, and then with support of the military, where Hemeti and the leader of SAF come together to overthrow the government of Bashir, they establish a citizen-led. There's a transition council which is led by a citizen who's a prime minister, but also Hemeti and the leader of SAF are part of that transition committee. After that, they overthrow that transition committee. Now the problem is there's a contest. So and then so they form a new council which is led by the leader of SAF and Hemeti, and they disagree on the terms, among which was that they wanted to integrate RSF into the military
SAF,
within
RSF failed,
and RSF refuses, and it says so these guys wanted to integrate like in 2 years, and RSF says this should take a period of maybe 7 to 10 years, and there's a sharp disagreement, tensions rise, and RSF attacks the SF, takes over Khartoum. SAF goes to Port Sudan, so there's that contest. Of course, Hemeti tries to mobilize civil society organizations to get them behind him, but they don't. So he falls back to rely on this other region of Darfur and Kordofan, and also manages to bring these other parts together to say, look, we are representing this. So in terms of legitimacy, Hemeti himself was among the people who attacked and killed people in Darfur. But of course, he works with Bashir, but now he finds himself with no other option except to get back to these individuals. But of course, they all have interests against the SAF government, so they can manage to come together.
I get you.
So in terms of legitimacy, he would claim that he represents a certain specific part of Sudan, which has legitimate...
Because of the interests he's collectivizing on the table. I also understand that these paramilitary groups represent quite some critical human rights risks. I've had M23 being accused of genocide, rape, and same thing with RSF. You kind of talked about it. How is it that they hold to the concept of legitimacy, but in their action, it is reported that the actions border on inhumane actions? If they are protecting people, then why is it that about 1 million people also have to die in the process?
So when you interact more with the subject, especially with the entire topic on peace and security and international players and all, you realize that, of course, there is the formal international legal framework, which, of course, for example, like the leaders, the sultans, these leaders have been sanctioned by by the UN, some by the US. But in terms of real action, there is little to support that. So indeed, people have died. They have been killed within these exchanges. The UN and other bodies have pronounced themselves. There have been many UN expert reports that have been written that have even, for example, implicated Rwanda and Uganda, even UAE. So in terms of the legal framework that we all know, there's been pronouncements and sanctions, but in terms of backing that with force that is able to cause change or impact or to limit the actions, I think it's limited.
So those
right?
specific actors.
Yeah, but also you've got to also understand the nature of the players themselves. So we could argue, especially like the BRICS or the Eastern Wing does not so much care for the idea of human rights, but also under
when they're involved as an external player, to them it is interest.
It's more economic interest. But also when you look at, for example, the United States, which is often the leading actor from the West, it's the leader currently, Trump, is also more in pursuit of economic interest at the expense of the other humanitarian approach to dealing with issues, especially in the south part. So like I said, some of these things are known that this one is supporting the other, and the limited action is taken. But also you've got, for example, in Sudan, if, for example, we are saying that UAE has been implicated supporting RSF and all, you've also got to understand the larger politics, especially, for example, around the Israel conflict and how UAE has been able to normalize, has been among those Islamic countries that have normalized with Israel, of course, with others. So UAE then is of strategic importance to the US and Israel in as far as it has accepted to normalize.
The relationship
so in some way it acts as an ally. Some others would call it even a satellite state, which is a representation of the same. So to that extent, there is a limit to the extent to which I think the US etc. can deal with it. But also you've had Trump traveling to Qatar, to Saudi Arabia, and getting these guarantees, trillions of dollars in promises of investment for Qatar. I think you also had giving him a jet, a presidential jet, etc. So in terms of the relationship between these states and the US, there's bigger for them to achieve working together than coming down hard on them. But also
around humanitarian grounds. Something like what happened with the Jamal Khashoggi case. Action needs to be taken, but the relationship is fragile.
Yeah, but also, for example, in terms of active finance interest, there is a specific. It's called the. So there's a project, a construction project, which was passed under the Biden government, which is an infrastructure project that passes through Angola, Zambia, and DRC Congo, which seeks to, it's called the Lobito. Yeah, it's the Lobito project, which seeks to make it easy for the extraction or exploitation of resources within those regions.
Like an American...
construction project.
Belt and road.
Yeah. So which is meant to make that easier. Yeah. So which also informs. There's also the Trump within his campaign. There's the Project 2025, which also involves seeking these opportunities within Africa to jumpstart industrialization within the US and the West generally, which also informs why Trump is more interested in Rwanda and Congo sitting to have a ceasefire and sort of these things so that he can get what he wants. So in terms of interest themselves, they are more active, proximate interest by those actors that we are willing to overlook some of these actions to be able to protect those
interests.
You've also seen, I think, was it last month when heads of states from about 5 African countries, I think it was Gabon, Guinea,
in Washington?
Senegal, went to Washington, and the kind of chat they were having. So I think the US wants to establish, I think, like a military base in Gabon to be able to protect its interests. So if it has a base there and it has this road, you can be sure that it has...
You protect the...
Yeah, so you see... the essence of that chart is to show you what is more proximate and what Trump much more wants to preserve.
Yeah, sure. I just want us to get into the projections, right? What do you foresee in terms of projections on this paramilitary influence? And how do you think nations are going to interact with it? Of course, we know with Uganda, I think they use maximum force against any flickers of paramilitary foreign interest. But I don't know, you could do some form of analysis there as we wrap up.
So my projection is that this is going to continue. I don't see an active incentive of anything to make me believe that we are about to pacify this. Because I think, for example, you've seen active accusations, including in Sudan, because Ruto has on several occasions invited and hosted Hemeti, who serve things that is not recognized. But also, for example, like I was telling you how Gachagua said these guys have deals that they are working on together, Ruto and Hemeti himself as individuals, which sort of takes away the trust within Kenya, which is currently the chair of ESC, that it's also more interested in pacifying than it is in consolidating of direct interests. But also, I don't see how we solve the M23 question, because I don't think that President Kagame is willing to cede or to stop acting for and on behalf of M23 if there is if certain guarantees of his interest are not met. And I am unsure that Tshisekedi and where he sits, he is willing to give that, especially given that he has already sort of naively decided to serve himself to the US without maintaining some level of leverage. So I still see that push and pull happening
from a position of weakness.
And for Uganda, and for Uganda, my problem is that it's also getting at a point where it will be risky, where it has to do a lot of managing its internal issues, especially going to elections and also the transition period. It also needs to get its internal organizing right and not invite other external players to sort of bring their noses here. So I don't see how, because also you'll have to understand of course there's a chat we never have in terms of how the US and all these big states work and how they pit us against each other. So you will notice, like, for example, you've had the chat where the US wants to, is it extradition, to bring that immigrants to Uganda.
Uganda, yes.
So which means that there has been some level of discussion between Museveni and the State Department or Trump himself. So it means that Museveni has decided to guarantee that we are willing to take these in, which is not a small thing, especially when you know Trump's interest in dealing with immigration and how other states have been negotiating to host or not to host. So we always have being pitted against each other. So my analysis, of course, there are certain things we can't say, but it's never in the interest.
You also close.
I want to close by saying that that the stability of some of these regions does not help or guarantee certain interests, and because some interests are leveraged when there is this confusion and chaos, which doesn't seem to me that that's about to stop, and that we have sobered up as state members within the region to be able to care about pacifying the region for our own benefit. We are continuously accepting what the mercy of bigger interests which pity us against each other, remain in confusion while they extract minerals
and resources
and
in
build
that
themselves.
confusion.
So it makes it difficult for me to tell you that the trend is looking better.
It's going to get better. Thank you, Lawel.
Yeah.
We look forward to seeing that paper that you're writing. I
yeah.
hope you invite us to the launch of the paper. To your audience, we loved having you. We hope you learned quite a great deal, whether you're in Gaborone or Joburg, or wherever you're watching this podcast from. We think Africa needs to have these conversations more often to understand where we are at, because that's a good place to start. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest podcast, the Center for Policy Analysis podcast that is profiling African ideas and people that are shaping the future of their communities. Subscribe to all our platforms on YouTube and Podbean.